I do not understand why more games do not feature comeback mechanics. Rescuing an attempt in a game from going horribly wrong brings me a huge sense of accomplishment, and it's something I enjoy a lot. It's easy to find these moments in multiplayer games where quick thinking and precise play can shift a detrimental situation to a positive one. However, when I play single-player games, I find these systems are hardly leveraged. Sure, there are checkpoints, and often games feature health upgrades after a long segment of fights, but I think there's a potential in making the player work towards getting back into a fight, even when they made mistakes in the first half. Today, on this episode of Gaming Keystones, I'm going to cover comeback mechanics, analyzing their current place in the gaming market with some games that utilize them well and some that do not. While the focus of this video is on the implementation of comeback mechanics in single-player games, I wanted to go over how these dynamics are implemented in multiplayer experiences first, as they are much more widely utilized. In party games, such as Mario Kart Wii or Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, these mechanics are put into place to minimize the skill difference between two players. Mario Kart Wii weights the items based on how poorly a player is doing in the race, typically giving more powerful items to those further away from the finish line. This helps make these games competitive, even when two players have different skill levels. This system makes the game more fun, as it helps equalize the game. Additionally, it helps smooth the skill curve. A lesser skilled player can utilize a bullet bill just as proficiently as a skilled player could. This comeback mechanic keeps players engaged in the match regardless of their previous errors. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate takes a different approach. There is a comeback mechanic in it too, but it does not differentiate a skill gap nearly as much. When one character receives damage, they receive more rage, giving them more knockback on their attacks. This enables people to catch up and potentially get some early kills if they fall behind. I enjoy this mechanic, as it helps keep games close. However, it does not always keep games close, especially when people have varying levels of skills. A more skilled player is more likely to recognize the patterns of an opponent and therefore capitalize or negate the effects of rage more proficiently. In fact, it can even expand the difference between two contenders. I think this system also works well, as many fans of this series look to this game as a competitive fighting game. The way Super Smash Bros. Ultimate works in their comeback mechanic would likely be better suited for a single-player experience too, as when I play a single-player game I want to get good at the game and not progress solely due to luck. I've seen other ways this could be handled too. Boomerang is a party game where each player fights over little gold pieces, and whoever can collect 30 first wins. However, when a character gets hit by a boomerang, they lose some of their pieces, which can be then collected by other players. The more pieces they had before getting hit, the more pieces they drop. It's simple, and honestly intuitive, but since getting hit scales with the number of pieces a character had initially, it leads to easy comebacks. I think it's implemented well, and it can keep one player from remaining in control for an entire match. On the other hand, consider a game like Timberman Vs. The sole factor in this game is reaction time. If you mess up or get too far behind, the game can feel entirely unwinnable. There's nothing to assist that player who's innately worse than the other one, and this can be polarizing and disheartening. The lack of a comeback mechanic can easily make the game less enticing. However, at the same time, this can lead to potentially satisfying victories, as it truly felt like you earned your victory all throughout. Just because there's not a comeback mechanic does not mean a game is lacking one. In fact, I've even seen some examples where these equalizers go too far. In My Singing Monsters Playground, the developers designed characters that feel slippery and challenging to control. This keeps a more competitive nature and allows for comebacks because the games are harder to optimize. It came across as frustrating to me, as I wanted to find ways to perform better than average, but these limitations restricted my ability to do so. In sum, multiplayer experiences can either be enhanced or downgraded due to their focus on encouraging a comeback mechanic. Some games revolve around them while others simply put them in as a supplement. In fact, some games thrive because they don't have them. Though not every implementation is perfect, comeback mechanics are an exciting part of many multiplayer games. However, despite their popularity in multiplayer titles, comeback mechanics hardly reach the single-player games market. I think these systems would work wonderfully in single-player games too, as they could easily add to the sense of power and control I have over a character. Still, to reach this end goal, not just any comeback mechanic would fit. The comeback mechanic needs to add a level of depth to the gameplay and encourage higher skill. These mechanics can be used for other purposes, but using them to help regain control over a dire situation should require some sort of risk and reward. The first one that comes to mind is the wall jump from Super Mario Bros. Wii. This allowed me to save myself from death in a dark pit and continue through the level. It's simple, and it doesn't overly cushion my fall like the bubble when playing in multiplayer, but it also helps make these levels significantly easier. Looking back at Super Mario Bros. 3, the game is much less forgiving. Sure, some of the challenge reduction is due to alternate level designs, but the lack of a wall jump means there's much less room for error, and thus way more chance for me to make a comeback in the newer titles. The feature only creates a minor skill gap, yet it encourages players to focus on Mario's moveset. It contributes to making the Mario Bros. Series a much more accessible experience while still encouraging player skill. I think this is an excellent foundation for comeback mechanics in single-player games. They should encourage using player skills to recover from mistakes without undermining the difficulty of the game. Another similar mechanic is Witch Time in Bayonetta 3. Though far less drastic than recovering from a lethal fall, Witch Time is a system that allows the player to avoid damage and lean in for a heavy counterattack. It's not overly simplistic either. Missing this move can lead to some serious damage, while capitalizing properly is dependent on player skill. Without understanding what moves Bayonetta can perform, even a well-timed parry will not lead to much damage inflicted on enemies. Though this mechanic is fun and interesting to perform, it does not have the same effect as a more defined comeback mechanic, as it's embedded into Bayonetta's arsenal for use regardless of whether I was falling behind or not. Sure, proper use of Witch Time right before death can evoke similar feelings, but the mechanic itself is so integral to playing Bayonetta that more often than not, using it does not have that same reaction that a good comeback mechanic would. There is a feature sort of like a comeback mechanic in Skylanders Trap Team as well, where one character, Night Shift, has an ability that brings it back from the dead. However, there are no criteria required for it to happen. It basically serves as an additional health bar. Though it seems like a comeback mechanic, taking out enemies within this resurrected mode does not bring me increased satisfaction at all. Instead, since this is a constant every time I pick up the character and I don't need to work towards the result, the comeback mechanic falls flat. Similarly, upon my death in No More Heroes 3 and Wonder Boy the Dragon Trap, the developers introduce a system giving me bonus health. In Wonder Boy, this can lead to increased number of hearts, whereas in No More Heroes, I can begin the next attempt with certain power-ups. Despite being cool, these systems also fail to match the level of a comeback mechanic. Instead, they make runs without these power-ups seem hindered. They do not require any level of skill and thus hardly reward me for playing better. Again, these systems do not leave me with the same sense of excitement that other more significant comeback systems do. One game with a neat comeback mechanic is Ocho. This game is a top-down shooter where I take out enemies. However, it's a roguelike, meaning that upon death, I start over. This meant, of course, that there was a lot of tension leading up to death, making it the perfect game for a comeback mechanic. While it didn't necessarily blow me away, the game features an upgrade that increases my speed and damage when only 25% of my health is remaining. With this upgrade, I still must play well and hit my shots, but it gave me the power to perform better in stressful situations. At the same time, I had to purchase the upgrade. In this game, enhancements are sold as drinks from a bar, and each one needs to be purchased with in-game currency. This meant that I not only had to earn enough coins, but potentially forego other better upgrades to gain this enhancement, adequately rewarding me for narrowly escaping certain doom. Ocho features a couple other cool upgrades that work alongside this, potentially restoring health for maintaining a high combo or taking out enemies with a rifle. These mechanics are great, and since any misstep can lead to a quick demise, a narrow escape feels rewarding. Similarly, Eldest Scrolls grabs my attention. I know I've been mentioning this game a lot, but it honestly nails this. Since enemies do so much damage in this boss rush, I was constantly at risk of death. That made the signature ability of my character so much fun to leverage. When my blade was charged, any damage done to my opponents would restore some of my health. The game played into this, so the enemies had a lot of health and required careful planning to evade. Thus, it made any time I got damage feel like I was close to death, while still having me face an insurmountable boss. I truly had to master this mechanic to stand a chance, and it felt rewarding because I was often in a state of near disrepair, yet I could bring it back, potentially even multiple times in one fight. The comeback mechanic that centralized the gameplay helped make Eldest Scrolls memorable and rewarding. I recognize that I haven't played every game out there, but many times when I play a single player game and perform poorly, it feels like I'm just slowly bleeding out until I either reach a checkpoint, find a healing item, or die. I think there's a lot of room for developers to capitalize on near-death tension, and while it's not been successful in every way it's been implemented, a couple of games have implemented very interesting comeback mechanics that make them a lot of fun to explore. Thank you so much for watching.